It was a cold afternoon in New York City. The sky was cloudy, and the wind was sharp. People on the streets rushed to their destinations, bundled up in thick coats, holding onto their coffee cups and phones. The sound of cars honking, footsteps, and voices filled the air. It was just another busy day in Manhattan. Edward Langston, one of the richest men in the country, stepped out of his sleek black car. He was tall, well-dressed, and looked like someone important. His suit was perfectly pressed, his shoes polished to a shine. His driver tried to open an umbrella for him, but Edward waved him off. "I'll walk the rest of the way," he said, looking around. Edward was on his way to a private meeting at a luxury hotel nearby. But as he walked down the street, he noticed something different today. A group of people stood near the sidewalk holding signs. They were protesting. Their signs read things like, "We are not invisible," "Fair wages for all," and "People over profits." Normally, Edward wouldn't even glance at a protest. He had business to think about, deals to close, and meetings to attend. Today, something made him slow down. Maybe it was the way the wind suddenly felt colder. Or maybe it was the fact that he had just dropped his daughter off at ballet class and still felt her little. To avoid the crowd, and that's when he saw her. She was sitting alone against a brick wall, near a painted mural of children playing in the sun. The girl looked about 10 years old. Her skin was a deep brown, and her hair was thick, tied up in small braids. Clothes were worn and dirty. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She just sat there quietly, hugging her knees. Edward's eyes met hers for a moment. Most people would have kept walking, but Edward paused. Something in her eyes caught him, something heavy, something wise. She looked at him without fear or surprise, like she had seen 100 people just like him walk by. And she already knew they wouldn't stop. But Edward did. He didn't know why. He didn't know her name, but his legs moved on their own. Walked over to her slowly, trying not to scare her. She didn't blink. She just looked up at him. Edward bent down, still holding his phone in one hand. He opened his mouth to say something polite, like, "Are you okay, or do you need help?" But before he could speak, the girl whispered something so soft, so simple that it stopped him cold. "I don't need money," she said. "Just a hug, like your daughter gave you." Edward stared at her. The street noises faded. His heart skipped a beat. "How do you know I have a daughter?" he asked. Softly, the girl shrugged. "I saw you this morning. She hugged you before she got out of the car. You smiled. Then you drove away." Edward didn't remember anyone watching them. He had been in a hurry. His daughter had danced around the sidewalk and blown him a kiss. It had been a sweet moment. A normal moment. But now, standing in front of this girl, he realized how powerful that moment had been, at least to someone who didn't have it. The girl looked down at her shoes. One was missing its sole. The other had a hole in it. Her fingers were red from the cold. Her voice was quiet but steady. "People give me money sometimes," she said. "They drop coins in my cup. Some give me fries or old sandwiches. But no one ever hugs me. They don't even look me in the eye." Edward felt something heavy in his chest. He didn't cry easily. He had seen pain, suffering, and loss before. He had donated millions to charities, built schools, even funded hospitals. But none of that prepared him for this moment. This little girl didn't want money. She didn't want food. She wanted to feel what his daughter felt. Safe. Loved. Held without thinking, Edward opened his arms. "Would you like a hug now?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated. She looked up at him like she wasn't sure if he was serious. Then slowly, she stood up. She was small, thin, and shivering. She walked forward and stepped into his arms. Edward held her carefully, like she might break. She didn't cry. She didn't say a word. But she leaned into him like she had been waiting for this moment forever. And that's when the tears came. Not from her. From him. Edward Langston, the billionaire, the businessman. The man who had walked red carpets and stood beside presidents stood in the middle of a noisy street, holding a child he didn't know, and cried. No cameras were there. No reporters. No applause. Just a man and a girl. To strangers connected by something deeper than money. A few people around them watched in surprise. Some took out their phones, but Edward didn't care. He didn't even notice. All he could think about was, how many children like her were out there, unseen, untouched, unloved? When the hug ended, she stepped back, her face calm. "Thank you," she said. "What's your name?" Edward asked. "Alani," she replied. "That's a beautiful name." She smiled, just a little. Then she turned and walked back to her spot by the mural. Edward stood there for a few seconds, unsure of what to do. He had to go to his meeting, but his heart was still there with her. He looked back once before walking away. That night, as Edward sat in his luxury apartment high above the city, he couldn't stop thinking about Alani. He remembered the way she looked at him, the way she spoke, the way she knew about his daughters. Hug. Her words repeated in his mind like an echo. Just a hug like your daughter. He tried to work. He answered emails, checked stocks, but none of it felt important. He called his assistant. "I need you to find someone for me," he said. "Who, sir?" "A girl named Alani. I don't know her last name. She's maybe 10. Homeless. She sits near a mural downtown. See what you can find?" The assistant hesitated. "That might be hard." "Try anyway," Edward said. He put his phone down and walked to the window. The city lights sparkled like stars. But all he saw was her face. He had given her a hug. But she had given him something too, something he didn't even know he was missing. A reminder that money wasn't everything, that love mattered more, that sometimes it's the most powerful thing in the world is a hug. For the next few days, Edward Langston could not think about anything else. He went to his office, sat in his big leather chair, opened his laptop, but his mind was still with the little girl who had asked him for a hug. Her name was Alani. She had looked at him with quiet eyes and whispered the words that still rang in his ears. "I don't need money, just a hug like your daughter." He couldn't forget the way she said it. It wasn't anger or begging. It wasn't a complaint. It was just honest. Pure. Sad. At night, he walked through his huge apartment in silence. The place had everything art on the walls, expensive rugs, glass walls with a view of the whole city, but something felt empty now. He sat by the window and looked at the lights below, wondering how many children like Alani were down there. How many were watching families laugh and eat together from the outside? How many were dreaming about hugs? The next morning, he told his assistant again, "Find her. I don't care how long it takes." His assistant Daniel was used to getting strange requests from powerful people. But this one felt different. There was no press involved, no cameras, no company time. Daniel asked, "Sir, are you sure this girl even wants to be found?" Edward didn't answer right away, and he said softly, "She didn't ask for anything but a hug." "That tells me everything I need to know." So Daniel started calling shelters and soup kitchens. He checked local reports, even sent someone to the area where Edward had met her. For 3 days, nothing came up. Alani wasn't in any system. No foster home had her name. No police reports. No school records. It was like she had just disappeared. Edward started going back to that street corner himself. He stood near the same mural, hoping to see her again, but she wasn't there. Some of the protest signs were still up. Past him without noticing, he was one of the richest men in America. He didn't care. He waited for an hour, then another. Still no sign of her. Finally, on the 5th day, an older woman walked by with a shopping cart full of blankets and bags. She wore a blue hat and smiled with a missing tooth. Edward politely asked, "Excuse me, ma'am? Do you know a young girl named Alani? About 10 years old? Braided hair? Dark skin? She sits around here sometimes." The woman stopped and studied. His face? "You the one who hugged her?" Edward blinked. "Yes." She nodded slowly. "She told me about you. Said some fancy man gave her the kind of hug you don't forget." Edward felt a warmth spread through his chest. "Do you know where I can find her?" "She moves around," the woman said. "Sometimes she goes to the church shelter on 6th. Other times she sleeps behind the library. She don't stay in one place too long. Said she don't want to be Locked up in a system again? Edward frowned. System. Foster care, the woman explained. They took her in after her mama died. She didn't like it. Said people in those homes got paid to pretend they cared. Edward was quiet. She's tough, though, the woman added. Smart, too. But lonely. Shh. She watches families like it's a movie she can't join. That sentence hit Edward hard. A movie she can't join. He thanked the woman and gave her a warm coat from the car. Then he drove straight to the church shelter. A small building with peeling paint and a crooked sign. It wasn't the kind of place billionaires usually visited. Inside, it smelled like soup and old blankets. A kind-looking man with a gray beard welcomed him. We don't get many people in suits, he joked. Edward smiled. I'm looking for a girl. Her name's Alani. The man raised an eyebrow. Why are you looking for her? Edward hesitated, then said, She reminded me of what matters. The man nodded slowly. She comes here sometimes, doesn't talk much. But she always reads the children's books in the corner, and she draws. Beautiful sketches, mostly of people hugging. Edward's throat tightened. Can you let me know the next time she's here? I can try, the man said. But if you hurt her, if this is some rich man's game, I'll personally throw you out. Edward looked him in the eye. Not a game, I promise. 2 days later, Edward got the call. She's here, the man said. Quiet today, sitting by the books. Edward left his meeting in the middle of a pitch. His board members stared as he walked out without explanation. Didn't care. He arrived at the shelter and stepped inside. And there she was. Alani sat cross-legged by a stack of children's books. She was flipping through the pages of a fairy. Till her fingers traced the drawings like they were magic. Edward approached slowly. Hi, Alani, he said softly. She looked up and blinked. Then a tiny smile formed on her lips. I wondered if you'd come back, she said. He sat beside her. I've been looking everywhere for you. Why? She asked simply. Because what you said to me changed something inside me. Alani tilted her head. Most people forget me the minute they walk away. I didn't forget, Edward replied. I couldn't. She didn't speak for a while. Then she held up the book she was reading. This one's about a princess who gets rescued by her dad. He fights a dragon for her. Edward looked at the picture. The drawing showed a father holding his daughter, both smiling. I like this. Story, Alani said. But I don't believe in dragons. Or dads. Edward didn't know what to say. I had a mom, she continued. She used to sing to me when we were cold. Even when she was sick, she made me laugh. Then she got worse. We didn't have a doctor. We didn't have anything. Edward listened, his heart heavy. She died one night while I was asleep beside her, Alani said. I woke up and she was cold. I called someone from the hall. They took me away, said I needed to be placed in care. She didn't cry while telling the story. She told it like it had happened to someone else. Like it was just another fact. They moved me around a lot. Some houses were okay. Others, she paused. I didn't feel safe. So I ran. Been on the streets for 2 years now. Edward gently asked. How do you survive? I'm careful. She said, I hide at night. I don't trust anyone. Except Miss Carrie, the lady with the cartan Pastor Jim here. Sometimes he gives me soup and crayons. Edward looked at her. She was so young, but her eyes held years of pain. He asked, Why did you ask me for a hug that day? Alani closed the book and looked down. Because you hugged your daughter like she was the most important thing in the world. And she hugged you back like she believed it. I wanted to know what that felt like. Just once. Edward felt his throat tighten again. I didn't want your money, she added. I know people like you think that's what everyone wants, but I just wanted someone to see me. Saw you, Edward. Whispered, and then you cried, she said, surprised. Why? Because you reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago. Alani studied him. You forget how to hug. Edward chuckled softly. No, but I forgot how much love matters. I've spent years chasing money, success, power. But that day, you showed me what real loss looks like. what loneliness feels like. You made me feel again." They sat in silence for a while. Then Alani asked, "Will you come back?" Edward nodded. "I want to, but only if you want me to." She smiled slightly. "Okay, but no toys. I don't like when people try to buy me." "No toys," he agreed. "Just stories, and maybe soup. Deal." From that day on, Edward visited the shelter every few days. He didn't bring gifts. He brought time. He sat with Alani and listened. He told her about his childhood, how he lost his own father when he was 9. How his mother raised him while cleaning houses. How he promised himself he'd become rich enough that they'd never be poor again. "She must be proud," Alani said one day. "She passed away before I became rich," Edward said. "But I think she'd like you." Alani grinned. "Was she good at hugs?" "The best," Edward said with a warm smile. Alani didn't ask for anything more, but slowly she started to open up. She showed him her drawings. She told him jokes. She even asked about his daughter Emma. "What's she like?" she asked one afternoon. "She loves dancing," Edward said. "She talks a lot, and she's kind." Alani thought for a moment. "Would she like me?" "I think she'd love you," Edward said. Alani looked away, suddenly shy. Then one day she asked, "Can I meet her?" Edward paused. He hadn't expected that. The answer was simple. "Yes," he said. Alani had never been to a dance recital. She had never even seen a real stage. Most days her stage was the sidewalk, where she watched people pass by with headphones in their ears and coffee in their hands. She'd like to guess their names, make up stories about where they were going, who they loved, and what their homes looked like. But now something different was happening. She was going to see a real dance recital with Edward. It had been 2 weeks since she first asked if she could meet his daughter Emma. At first, Edward wasn't sure how to make it happen. He didn't want to rush things. Emma was only 12, kind and sweet, but still a child. He didn't know how she would feel meeting someone like Alani, who had lived such a different life. But after thinking deeply about it, he realized something. Emma needed to meet her, and Alani needed to feel seen not just by him, but by someone her own age. When Edward told Emma about Alani, he was gentle. They were sitting on the couch in their living room, sharing popcorn after school. "Emma," said, "I met someone very special recently. A girl around your age. Her name is Alani." Emma looked up with interest. "Where did you meet her?" "Downtown," Edward said. "She doesn't have a home right now. She's been through a lot, but she's strong and smart, and she reminds me of you." Emma smiled. "Can I meet her?" Edward blinked. He hadn't expected that answer so quickly. "You're not scared?" he asked. "Why would I be?" she said with a shrug. "She's a kid. I'm a kid. Maybe we'll be friends." And that was that. The next day, Edward told Alani the plan. "Emma's dance recital is this weekend. Would you like to come with me? It's not fancy, I promise. Just parents and kids. You'll be safe." Alani looked unsure. "Will people stare at me?" "They might," Edward said honestly. "But I'll be there the whole time. Will Emma hug you again like before?" "She always does," he said with a smile. "Okay," Alani whispered. "I'll come." The day of the recital arrived. Edward picked Alani up from the shelter. She wore a soft gray hoodie and jeans that were still a little too big, but she had washed her face and brushed her hair neatly. He brought her a coat knot, expensive, not new, just warm and soft. "This is for you," he said as he handed it to her. She touched it carefully, then looked at him. "You didn't have to buy anything, I know," he said. "But it's cold outside," she nodded. "Okay." In the car, Alani stared out the window the whole time. Every few minutes, she asked questions. "What's Emma dancing to? Is it a fast song? Are there lights?" Edward answered them all. He could tell she was nervous, but excited. The recital was in a small school auditorium. Parents sat in rows, some holding cameras, others holding bouquets. Children in glittery costumes peeked from behind the curtains. Edward led Alani to an empty seat near the middle. Nobody said anything at first. A few people looked at Alani curiously. But she kept her eyes on the stage. Then the lights dimmed. Soft music began to play. The curtain rose. A group of girls entered the stage. They were wearing blue dresses, twirling and stepping in rhythm. Edward leaned over and whispered, "That's Emma, the one in the middle." Alani nodded without taking her eyes off the stage. As Emma moved, Alani sat completely still, as if frozen in time. Her eyes were wide, shining in the stage light. Her mouth opened slightly, in awe. She had never seen anything so graceful. Way Emma spun, lifted her arms, smiled. It looked like she was flying. For those few minutes, Alani forgot she was sitting in old shoes in a room full of strangers. She forgot the cold nights and empty stomachs. She was just a girl watching another girl dance. When the performance ended, people clapped loudly. Parents cheered and whistled. Alani clapped too, but softly, as if she was scared to make noise. Edward turned to her. "What did you think?" Alani blinked. "That was like magic." He smiled. "She'll be happy you liked it." After the show, they waited near the back door where performers came out. Emma spotted her dad and ran to him. She hugged him, tight, just like she always did. Then she noticed Alani standing a little behind him, holding onto her new coat. Emma smiled. "Hi, you must be Alani." Alani gave a small wave. "You were amazing, thanks," Emma said. "Want to see my costume up close?" Alani nodded, and the two girls sat on the steps, talking like old friends. Edward stood back and watched them, his heart full. He couldn't believe how natural it all felt. There were no walls between them, no questions about money or status, just two girls being kids. Alani asked, "How long have you been dancing?" Emma replied, "Since I was 5. I fall down. A lot, though." They both laughed. Then Emma asked, "What do you like to do?" Alani thought for a moment. "I draw, mostly people and animals." "Cool. I can't even draw a stick figure." They talked for almost 20 minutes. It was time to go. Emma hugged Alani without hesitation. Alani stood stiff at first, surprised. Then slowly, she wrapped her arms around Emma too. It was the second real hug of her life, and it felt just as warm as the first. On the ride back, Alani was quiet. Edward asked if she was okay. "I'm good," she said softly. "Didn't know. People like her existed." "Like who?" "Kind people who don't care if you're poor or dirty." Edward's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Emma just saw you, like I did." "I liked being seen," Alani said. Over the next few weeks, things changed. Edward started spending more time at the shelter. He didn't just visit Alani. He talked to others, 2 teens, mothers, kids, even old men who just wanted someone to listen. He learned about their lives, their losses, their dreams. He stopped canceling those moments for meetings. His team noticed. "Sir," Daniel said one day, "your calendar looks ... different." Edward smiled. "So does my heart." He started small projects, quietly, without his name on them. He funded repairs for the shelter's roof, paid for. New beds, fresh paint, heaters. He hired a counselor to come in once a week, just to talk to the kids. But with Alani, he did something even more important. He stayed. It's consistent. He kept showing up. Sometimes they went to the library and read picture books. Sometimes they sat in the park watching dogs chase sticks. Once, they fed ducks at the lake, and Alani laughed so hard she fell off the bench. He didn't try to fix her. He just made space for her to grow, and slowly laughed more. She laughed more. She talked more. She asked questions. One day she even drew a picture of Edward and Emma. The 3 of them were standing under a tree, holding ice cream cones. At the bottom, she wrote in big block letters, "Not by blood, but still mine." Edward framed it and placed it on his desk. When his business friends visited, they asked, "Is that your daughter?" He said yes, because by now, that's how it is. Felt Emma and Alani became closer too. They texted, played board games. Emma helped Alani catch up on school subjects. In return, Alani showed her how to sketch animals with just a pencil and imagination. Edward watched their friendship grow like a miracle. One Saturday, as they sat together eating pizza, Alani looked at Edward and said, I never thought people like you were real. He asked, What do you mean? People with money who care, she said. You could have just driven away, but you stopped. He looked into her eyes. Because you mattered. You still do. Lonnie nodded. So do you. And in that moment, neither of them were broken, or neither of them were rich or poor, old or young, strong or weak. They were just human, connected by something money could never buy. Love, trust, a second chance. Alani was changing, and so was Edward. Before meeting her, Edward's world was all about numbers, deals, and meetings. He knew which stocks were rising, which companies were failing, and how to turn millions into billions. But now, something else mattered more. He started waking up thinking not about money, but about Alani, what she might be doing, how she was feeling if she had eaten. He found himself smiling when she laughed and worrying when she went quiet. He wasn't the only one changing. Alani, who used to hide her feelings behind silence, was slowly opening up. Her walls were still there, but now they had cracks where light could get in. She still didn't talk much about her past, but her eyes no longer looked empty. They looked alive. She still stayed at the shelter, but Edward was trying to find a better solution. He wanted her to have a place to sleep safely every night. A real home. But he didn't rush her. He remembered what she had told him, that she had run away from the foster system because it felt like prison. People pretended to care, but their hugs were fake. Their kindness came with rules. She didn't trust systems. She trusted people, and Edward wanted to be one of the few people she could really trust. One evening, they sat together in a park under a tree. Akayama had gone to a sleepover, so it was just the two of them. The wind was soft. The sky was filled with orange and pink light from the setting sun. Alani pulled out her sketchbook and handed it to Edward. I made this, she said quietly. Edward opened the book and stared. There were drawings of people hugging, a mother and daughter, two kids on a bench, a man lifting a child in the air, and then on the last page there was a picture of him, Edward, kneeling in front of Alani on the street. The day they met, he remembered the moment clearly. The mural behind her, the way she looked up at him, the way she whispered, "Just a hug like your daughter." The drawing was beautiful and raw. It wasn't just lines and shading. It was emotion. It was truth. Edward felt his chest tighten. You remember everything, he said. Alani nodded. I draw what I don't say. You're amazing, he said softly. She shrugged, but she smiled a little. I used to draw with my mom. She was good at it too. Edward asked, do you miss her a lot? Every day, she said. But sometimes, when I'm with you and Emma, it doesn't hurt as much. That one sentence felt like a gift, a fragile, powerful gift. In that moment, Edward knew something deep inside. He wasn't just helping her. She was helping him too. That night after, dropping her back at the shelter, Edward couldn't sleep. He sat by the window of his apartment and looked at the city below. The lights blinked like stars, but none of it mattered. Not the skyline, not the penthouse, not the $1,000,000 furniture. What mattered was the girl who had taught him how to feel again the next morning. Edward met with his lawyer. I want to set up something for her, he said. An account, a future. But more than that, I want to give her a home, if she wants it. The lawyer looked surprised. You mean adoption? Yes, Edward said. But I want to do it right. Slowly, on her terms. Edward also met with a child therapist. He wanted to make sure Alani had support, someone to talk to besides him. Someone trained to help her heal. The therapist, Dr. Keller, agreed to meet Alani at the shelter once a week. At first, Alani didn't say much. She mostly drew during their sessions. But over time, she started talking. She spoke about her mom's songs, the way her mother held her close during storms, the night her mother coughed so hard she couldn't breathe, the coldness of her body the next morning, the fear of being taken away, the homes that weren't really homes, the nights she cried quietly so no one would hear. Dr. Keller was patient. She listened. She didn't push. One day after a session, Alani told Edward, I like her. She doesn't ask dumb questions. Edward smiled. That's good. Lonnie looked at him and said, "Are you doing all this because you feel bad for her?" "Me? No," Edward said softly. "I'm doing it because I care about you." "Why?" "Because you remind me that love is more powerful than money. And because you're family now." Alani didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "Okay." From that point, things started moving forward. Edward met with social workers and explained his plan. At first, they were cautious. Billionaires didn't usually adopt children from shelters, but Edward was clear. This wasn't about image or charity. It was about love. Emma was excited. She kept asking, when will she move in? Edward reminded her, only when Elaine's ready. To help with the transition, Edward began inviting Alani over more often. She stayed for dinner on weekends. She watched movies with Emma. She helped cook pancakes on Sunday mornings. One afternoon, while painting birdhouses with Emma in the backyard, she looked up and asked, "Is this what having a sister feels like?" Emma grinned. "Pretty much." "Like it," Alani said. The next week, Alani spent her first full night at their home. At first, she didn't sleep. She sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Edward noticed the light still on and knocked gently. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "I'm scared," she said. "Of what?" "That if I get used to this, it'll disappear." Edward walked in and sat beside her. "I can't promise the world will never change, but I can promise that we're not going anywhere." She looked at him. "Promise," he held out his pinky. "Pinky swear." She giggled and linked her finger with his. That night, she slept peacefully. As weeks turned into months, Alani became a part of their daily life. She helped Emma with homework. She planted flowers in the garden. She even began calling Edward Dad by accident once and then laughed when he looked surprised. "Oops," she said. "I guess that slipped out." "It's okay," Edward said. "I liked it." They all laughed together, but the biggest change wasn't just in their home. It was in Edward's heart. He started looking at his businesses differently. He asked harder questions. Were they helping people? Were they doing harm? He realized that while he had built an empire, he had also ignored the people at the bottom. The people like Lanai. So he made changes. He increased wages for his employees. He started a scholarship program for homeless youth, named it the Alani Fund. He stopped doing business with companies that abused workers. He gave his rich friends two choices: donate to real causes or stop pretending they cared. Some walked away. Some stayed and changed too. But Edward didn't care about approval anymore. He had something better. He had purpose. One evening, Alani showed him a new drawing. It was the three of them, him, her, and Emma, standing in front of their house. Under it, she had written, "This time, I believe it's real." Edward framed it and placed it beside the first drawing she had given him. He looked at both every morning. A reminder of the day everything changed. A reminder that love, not money, saves lives. A reminder that one hug can begin a new story. 2 years had passed since Edward first saw Alani sitting quietly by the mural on that cold New York street. Back then, she was just a small girl with tired eyes and a broken shoe. I hadn't known her name, her story, or her pain. He only knew one thing when she whispered, "I don't need money, just a hug like your daughter." Something deep inside him changed. Now Alani stood in the living room of Edward's home, taller, stronger, and happier. She wore a bright blue dress that she picked herself and shiny black shoes that Emma helped her choose. Her hair was tied neatly with white ribbons. There was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Today something special was happening. Edward was adopting her. It was a quiet ceremony, just like Alani had wanted. No cameras, no news, no big party. Only the people who mattered: Edward, Emma, a judge, 2 kind social workers, and Dr. Keller, the therapist who had helped her find her voice again. They were all in a small room at the community center, not a courtroom, not a mansion, because Alani had asked for something simple. A place that felt real. She had chosen this center because it was where Edward had first learned her name. It was the place where the first real steps of their journey began. She didn't want marble floors or fancy flowers. She just wanted to Feel safe. Wanted the day to feel honest. It did. Edward held her hand as the judge spoke kindly. You don't have to say anything you don't want to, the judge said, smiling at Alani. But Alani stood proudly. I do want to say something, she said, her voice soft but strong. Everyone went quiet. She looked around at the small room. I used to think families were just in movies or books. I used to think hugs were for other people. I was scared that if I started to believe in good things, they'd get taken away again. She turned to Edward. But you didn't take anything from me. You gave me something instead. You gave me my first real hug. You kept giving. Edward's eyes filled with tears. You didn't just make me feel loved, you made me feel seen and safe and real. She looked at Emma and smiled. And you gave me a sister. One who likes to steal the blankets and eat too much cereal. Everyone laughed, including Emma. Then Alani finished, So, I'm really happy to be adopted. The truth is, I already felt like I belonged. Today just makes it official. Room clapped softly. Not loud or fancy, but warm and gentle like a heartbeat. The judge signed the papers and handed a copy to Alani. Edward bent down beside her and whispered, You ready to go home, sweetheart? She looked at him and whispered back, I already am. After the ceremony, they went out for dinner. Nothing big, just a small pizza place where Emma and Alani could eat as many slices as they wanted. They sat at a booth by the window, sharing stories and jokes. Alani laughed louder than usual. She didn't hold back. And Edward couldn't stop smiling. Later that night, as Alani got ready for bed, she stood in front of her mirror. Her room was filled with drawings, books, and small stuffed animals that Emma had shared. On her desk sat a photo frame Edward, Emma, and Alani, all smiling under the tree where they used to sit and talk. She looked at her reflection, brushed her braids, then whispered to herself, I made it. Down the hall, Edward stood outside her door for a moment, just listening. He wasn't checking on her because he was worried, just liked hearing her hum while she got ready for sleep. It reminded him of his mother. Come. When he walked into the living room, Emma was curled up on the couch with a blanket. Dad, she said, do you think Alani feels truly happy now? I think so, Edward said. Do you? Emma nodded. She's not afraid anymore. That was the truth. Alani had faced fear her whole life. Fear of being alone, being forgotten, being unloved. But now, she had more than safety. She had joy. In the weeks that followed, Alani started at a new school. She was nervous at first, afraid the other kids would treat her differently. But Emma introduced her to her friends, and soon, Alani had her own group. She joined the art club. Her teacher said she had a gift. She draws feelings, the teacher said one day during a parent-teacher meeting. Not just faces or places, feelings. Edward smiled proudly. Alani's drawings were now full of color, bright skies, warm hugs, families. She still sometimes drew shadows, but now there was always light near them. One evening, she handed Edward a new picture. It showed a big tree with 3 people under it like before, but now there were 4. Edward, Emma, Alani, and a baby. He looked up, surprised. What's this? I thought maybe one day you might want more kids, she said, blushing. And I'd help. I'd be the best big sister ever. Edward pulled her into a hug. You already are. She whispered, Thank you for seeing me. He whispered back, Thank you for saving me. Because that was the truth. Edward had saved Alani from loneliness, from fear, from a life of feeling invisible. But Alani had saved Edward too. She reminded him that love was more valuable than money, that success wasn't measured in buildings or cars but in laughter, in hugs, in late-night talks and quiet drawings. He started living differently. Not just donating money, but giving time. He visited shelters, not as a rich man, but as a father. A friend, other children started calling him Mr. Langston and asking him to listen to their stories. He listened to every one. And when he hugged them, it wasn't out of guilt or pity, it was out of love. Alani often went with him. She told her story when she felt ready. She gave hope to others like her. She didn't hide her past. She used it to light the way forward. One day, while walking through the same park where they used to feed ducks, Alani turned to Edward and said, "Do you ever miss your old life?" He thought for a moment. "I miss who I used to be, only because I didn't know you yet." She smiled. "You're soft now." "I was always soft inside," he replied. "You just brought it out." That night, Emma, Edward, and Alani sat together on the floor of their living room, eating popcorn and watching a movie. They laughed until they couldn't breathe. No one cared about the time. No one cared about homework or meetings. They just cared about each other at the end of the movie. Alani yawned and leaned her head on Edward's shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. He kissed the top of her head and replied, "You were always meant to." She closed her eyes. Safe, loved, home.